Hello, and welcome to another edition of Quarantine the Past, the almost weekly music podcast that recommends the best new music while also satisfying your cravings for nostalgia. This is our monthly release roundup where Juan Rodriguez and I sit down and talk about as many albums from the month that's just gone by as possible. We're looking at March 2023, and while it wasn't a classic month for new releases, I think there was certainly plenty to talk about. So we're recording this on the 1st of April. Unfortunately, quite a few of the big albums of March were released on the 31st of March. So we've had precisely 24 and a bit hours to listen to them. And the first one of those that I wanted to talk about was the boygenius debut album, The Record. Something that has been trailed quite heavily with the singles. There's been quite a lot of hype and some pretty big statements in the early reviews for this record as well. We heard phrases like instant classic. I think there was a reference to Phoebe Bridges' solo material as epoch defining. So some pretty high praise and a lot of people getting very excited about this record. Are you one of them, Juan?
So I should preface by saying that I've only been listening to it since yesterday. I didn't really have time to listen beforehand, and it's just I'm still in process mode right now. But I will say that I can't see this feeling like it's like I feel like the strongest songs from these artists come individually, and I feel like it's the same thing with albums. Like I can think of albums by Julian Baker or even Lucy Dacus, even probably Phoebe Bridgers, where I feel like they're stronger records as opposed to like the sum of what these parts are in a sense.
Okay.
And I'm kind of getting that impression from it. It's not really sticking with me. I feel it's not too much of a strong record. I think there's a few standout songs, if you can call it that, but maybe I'm being generous because
it's a begrudging comment, that, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, I'm struggling. Yeah. I mean, I think there were like one or two tracks where I think $20 Bill is probably like the one that I like the most. But other than that, I'm really having a hard time finding. I don't know, David. I'm just kind of wondering, like, is this as far as they can go in a musical sense? Like I feel like I'm starting to feel the strain and the limitation of what they can offer from a musical sense. And I know that they have their very particular themes, and I think that's great and it's worth celebrating. But at the same time, I'm having a hard time trying to find anything too distinctive in the music itself.
I sort of had an opposite view. I think I've not really enjoyed any of these artists as solo performers or on a big scale, really. Moments rather than records, but I find that they become more than the sum of their parts as a trio. There's something alluring, I think, about the harmonies, about the chemistry that they have together. I do get a good sense of a real bond there that isn't sort of, certainly isn't something they're faking. I think it's a genuine bond and a chemistry, and I think they're having a lot of fun working together and fleshing out each other's ideas. I think in some ways that might also be part of the problem. That might be one of the things that sort of stops it from being elevated to the next level. There isn't a sense of a conflict, or it sounds a little cozy in places, right? And I love harmonies. I'm a real sucker for harmonies, but it's harmonies on every song. It becomes a bit predictable. Okay, it's the single voice in the verse, and then we're going to get some chorus, some harmonies coming in for the bridge and the chorus. And I think a lot of the songs, $20 is the one that sort of just goes up that notch, and it's got that, pretty raucous climax with the guitars, and it builds up, and there's a sense of payoff. I didn't hear too much payoff with any of the other songs. So I think that was my favorite of the singles, and it's my favorite song on the record. But I think it's I wouldn't say strong, but I think it's an enjoyable album. It's one of the more enjoyable records of the month. But I think in some ways the high praise has kind of saddled it with a expectation that the record has no chance of meeting. So if all the reviews were saying it's 7 out of 10, it's a strong record, there's some good songs, there's some bad songs, I'd be enjoying it, but I'm judging it against the reception it's had, and it doesn't measure up, you know.
So if you were weighing like a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young album with their solo work, would you say it's, you know, I don't know if you've heard that kind of seminal Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young album, but if we're making the same comparison, would you think it's better than just
No.
Okay.
No, and I've usually got an aversion to you know, I think the one sort of super group of recent years that I've, you know, that stands out for me is the New Pornographers. Yeah, they're not the New Pornographers. This isn't up there with that. It's a good record. It's a good record.
Yeah,
I'm sticking with good. It's not a great record for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's terrible either, but again, I listen to so many records where I feel like they kind of feel like a plateau. Like I feel like they offer as much as they can, and it reaches like a certain peak, but it's not a high one. And I feel like with this one, it's just going to stay in that realm for me. So I will give it more chances again. I started listening to it yesterday, and my opinion is definitely a half-baked one. So maybe it'll grow on me, but we'll see.
Well, if it does, we'll revisit that next month and see. So we I mentioned the New Pornographers. They've also got a new record out this month. And I've only listened to one of the lead singles from it. But from what you've told me, it's a bit of a, dare I say, return to form.
I can talk a little bit about it further because I did write for it elsewhere, and I'm not sure how much you know about the New Pornographers canon, but I think in what I kind of wrote about it, I wrote that it was probably my favorite since 2010's Together. I don't know if you remember that album.
I remember Together. I'm a little bit hazy. I kind of lost them after that a little bit.
Think of it like same consistency, same cohesion, but that one had more lavish and ornate instrumentation. Like it had slightly more Baroque elements to their sound. And I think this one is kind of sees the band kind of expanding their sonic range again. You could make the same case for Whiteout Conditions, which is like an album that they released a couple of years ago, which was more electronic based, but I feel like even within that realm, like the songwriting was very similar. But I feel like this one, they really take chances. Like the pacing is slower. There's less peppiness to their usual kind of sing-along power pop kind of sound, right? Where it's just very infectious and it's just very happy. This one is more methodical. It kind of deals with AC Newman kind of dealing with the boredom of being in the pandemic at the same time as dealing with like, can I offer anything else being in a long-standing band, you know? And I think that's a legitimate question.
It's something we touch upon quite a lot, isn't it? You know, we talked about it with Yo La Tengo, isn't it? What does that, you know, 500th Yo La Tengo album sound like? Is it necessary? It's good to hear that they're kind of embracing that and scratching that itch, I guess.
They're just doing new things, and I like that they're doing that.
I always sort of am drawn to the Nico Case songs first.
One of the best songs is from Nico, so you'll be pleasantly surprised.
And I always think her best. I always think some of her best material is within the New Pornographers as well. I mean,
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I will.
I don't think that's a hot take. I think I get that too. They have a really good backing band. I mean, that's the thing. Like everyone talks about Newman writing most of the songs, but they have a sextet with them, and this one has like horns. It has like all these little kind of added elements, and I think
so a bit more color and something new. Yeah,
bit more color, but again, don't expect like sing me Spanish techno or anything. Like the songs are a little slower, so for the most part, it has its moments where, but more slightly more mid-tempo. Don't expect and there's a really cool track. There's one track where it was like an outtake from a Dan Behar track from Brill Bruisers. I think that's the opening track is probably the more the peppier one of all of them. And it's probably because it's like an older song.
Not from this kind of writing session.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So let's throw to another band that's seemingly been around forever and released a million albums. Deerhoof also had a new one. Came out yesterday as well. This one's notable because it's predominantly, I think, I couldn't say whether it's all in Japanese or just predominantly in Japanese. Everything is Japanese. And it's really funny, isn't it? Because although that would be highly notable if the new Pornographers released an album entirely in Japanese, it sounds very much like Deerhoof, doesn't it? And you can almost listen to it without even noticing, really. I don't think it sounds as wildly different as you'd think.
I had that same exact comment. I feel like I understand their aesthetic so well that I didn't even realize that it was in Japanese until the third or fourth track. And I felt like I understood it in a subconscious level. So yeah, I had that same observation. It wasn't until I looked and I was like, oh yeah, this is not English.
And I think they're a band that kind of use vocals very much like it's another instrument, isn't it? Rather they're not like a lyrics band, are they?
No.
The vocal is just part of the chaos, and again, it's like nothing new, but I think they're just always a band to be cherished. I think I only really listen to them in smallish doses.
Me too.
But I tend to enjoy pretty much everything they do, and this felt very enjoyable and fun.
I'm also surprised it was recorded in a proper studio. Apparently it's the first time they've recorded in a proper studio.
Okay.
I don't see it. I mean, their production is usually pretty good. So
yeah, they always nailed the drum sound. I think it always sounds studio recorded. So,
but I don't know. I don't know if they did overdubs in this one or something. But Deerhoof, still sounds good.
It still sounds like Deerhoof, and I mean, if you hadn't heard them before, it's not a bad place to start. It's not like they've really lost their step. They're still producing the same sort of energy and caliber of music that they've always have been, I think. But always a band to raise a smile, I think. So that's Deerhoof. Let's talk about a few records that we've had a little longer than 24 hours to forge an opinion on. So Unknown Mortal Orchestra was another big record from the month. Another artist I've initially enjoyed. I think I enjoyed the second album was the last one I remember. I think that was the breakthrough record. And then I kind of lost a little bit of interest over the last couple of albums, but this one sort of pulled me back in. I thought it was a good record, albeit slightly long at about 60 minutes. I thought
it felt long. Okay.
I thought there was like a really, really good 40-minute album in here. If they could have just edited out a little bit, but what was your take on this one?
I mean, it surprised me because I am not a fan. I'm not gonna say that. I feel like I couldn't really connect with Multi Love and Sex and Food, which was Ruben's last two albums.
Yes.
I've always been a really fan of the first one, which is probably the more like loose, ramshackle kind of record that he's written, and it's like only 8 tracks, and I feel like he hasn't veered too far from it. But I think with this one, it just feels like it's one of his strongest from start to finish. I think I'm happy that I never write him off because it's kind of like that sound where it's like less polished DIY funk, and I can still I can hear strands of, you know, his beginnings with that, with his band, even if they're a pretty big band, like they're selling out amphitheaters. So so there's been a progression there, and I'm glad that he's still sticking to that aesthetic that sounds really similar to their early stride, but at the same time it sounds more confident, more assured. I really like the guitar work. It's not showy, super showy, but there's a lot of inventiveness too. And I think that's what I like the most about this record.
It's very distinctive as well, isn't it? You know what you're listening to, you know which band you're listening to pretty much. Throw a minute of any track on and you'll get that feel, I think.
Exactly.
There's a clear identity to the sound, and I this one definitely piqued my interest, and maybe that overlong feeling is just maybe not spending enough time with it, because it didn't feel like there was filler on there. I just have, I guess, attention span issues these days, I reckon. So let's move on. We'll move away from the guitar music a little bit. Hip hop, was it a good month for hip hop? Was there anything that took your fancy this month?
I mean, I think the one notable one that I found, I mean, we both heard one and we can talk about it in a second, but I'll make a mention about Navy Blue. Navy Blue is kind of a multi-hyphenate in every sense of the word. He's one of these rappers like worked with everyone from Frank Ocean to Earl Sweatshirt to even Billy Woods, No Ripcord favorite. So it's a really touching album. It focuses on themes about family and kind of like how the matriarchy kind of inspires him. I see a lot of like allusions to like Good Kid, Mad City, you know, because that album also deals with a lot of those themes as well. But I think what I like about this one is that it has like these classic soul and gospel elements, but they really mesh into his vocal tonality. And I feel like that's something with like, especially hip hop records where they kind of throw me off sometimes, where it can sound very off-putting, but they really sound very congruous with his vocals. And I think it just feels almost like you're listening to an actual band at times. And I really like that about this one. And again, really touching themes. So I think if you haven't heard it, I think this is like a really good record. I'll keep coming back to it throughout the year because he's been kind of like an indie artist for the most part, and he just got signed to Def Jam. So hopefully that gives him a little bit more visibility. So yeah, that's my pick from the hip hop side of things.
It sounds like something I would enjoy. The one that I listened to a little bit was the Danny Brown JPEGMAFIA one.
Yeah, I heard it too.
It was pretty challenging, pretty abrasive. I think the first few tracks I was like, whoa, this isn't particularly enjoyable. My dog was listening to it as well with me and looked pretty traumatized by the experience. And then it mellowed out a little bit, and I was starting to enjoy it a little bit more by the midpoint of the record. But a lot going on.
I think it does fit there, kind of. It seems like they are a natural fit, though, even if it sounds a little chaotic, and it's pretty fun. But at the same time, like the two personalities kind of meshing together seems to make sense here, and it almost sounds like a progressive hip hop album in a way, because it kind of, even if the songs are on the shorter side, you don't know if you're listening to it from beginning to end, you don't know when the songs sometimes end and when they begin. So it's almost like listening to a progressive rock album, but in hip hop form. But that's cool. You know, I don't know what's going on with the titles. Don't ask me. I mean, there's like a lot of references to like stuff that was of our age, like Garbage Pail Kids and and stuff like that. A lot of you know, isn't there a song called Step a Pig? I think it's like they're just having fun, just like, you know, just like doing something very madcap, but it's okay, it's fine. I feel like you don't
wild. Yeah.
I feel like hip hop normally there's so many serious albums, and I feel like, and I feel like now we're seeing these records that are a little bit more unhinged, and that's fine. It's kind of like listening to a psychedelic pop record or something in its own weird way.
Yeah,
So
I guess that's a good analogy, really. It's
yeah,
it's like, yeah, it's like a psychedelic version of hip, and that may well explain some of the themes. They might it might be the same sort of origin story for some of those themes being that wild, really.
right.
But yeah, I thought it was a lot. I thought it was really maximalist and over the top. It takes you a little bit of time to kind of get over that disorientation, but there's more ideas on this record than on many other albums put together, and
Yeah.
there's something to enjoy, I think, if you spend enough time with it. So I'll go back to The Well and give it another try, I think.
Yeah, me too. I need to get back to it, but I was
Maybe
running while listening to it. It's a good running record too.
a good running record, yeah, but not a good sort of dog sitting record. I think
No, maybe not.
I'll
Maybe
get the
not.
headphones on next time, I think.
Yeah.
So another pretty vibrant, energetic, maximal record was the Nia Archives one.
I haven't heard this
I don't
one.
think you've heard this one.
No.
I finally found one you haven't heard. So this is a British artist, originally from Bradford, just up the road from me in Yorkshire. But you would not think Yorkshire when you're listening to it. The lead
Yeah.
single, it's an EP. The record, I've got the title written down on my notes. It's
So it's
called
an EP, it's not a
yeah,
full. Okay.
Sunrise, Bang Your Head Against the Wall. And
Oh, that's a cool, right? That's a cool title. I like it.
and the lead single is called Baiana, and it's got a Brazilian sample and jungle and drum and bass beats going on, and it just feels very tropical, very summer, very party. It's really, really fun. Not my usual bag at all, but just a real ray of sunshine. And when you grow up in Yorkshire, and it's raining all the time, I think you long for that. So yeah, the beats on the record usually fall into that jungle drum and bass kind of arena, but there are some slower tempo moments, some slightly jazzier elements, particularly with her vocal as well. I think it's 6 tracks, a real variety, a real range, and a really strong talent, I think. So
Only
definitely
17 minutes too. That sounds very
exactly. So
enticing.
yeah, I mean,
Variety.
who hasn't got 17 minutes to spare? So
Right.
go listen to it, check it out. I think that's a really, really fun record, and
Nice.
one of the better ones I've heard this month, actually.
I will listen to it this weekend.
Cool.
Thanks for the rec.
So we'll throw to your record of the month, I think, and then we'll take a short break, and I'll tell you about mine. So
Yeah.
what was your record of the month?
I mean, I was split because I can talk about my almost album of the month later, but I will go on brand with the website, and I did give a pretty strong endorsement to Yves Tumor. It's probably I feel like with this artist, well, they continues to surprise me because all the albums sound very different. I feel like Yves started in this very experimental realm, if you can call it that. But throughout the years, like all the albums that Yves has been writing have become more pop oriented, and I feel like on this one it veers more into 90s alternative in a lot of ways, but not in a bad way.
The last one was kind of quite strong, so Prince vibes, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
And
And this one has them too, don't get me wrong. Like I feel like Prince will continue to be like Yves' kind of
go-to influence.
Yeah, go-to influence, like in a way. So I feel like while they has this kind of attitude about the record where it's just so confident and assured, but I see a lot of vulnerability also in the lyrical content. It's not just like necessarily a party record. So Yves worked with Alan Moulder, which Alan Moulder, as you know, has worked with Nine Inch Nails, worked with Smashing Pumpkins.
Absolutely.
with
Just
all
a
these artists.
legend of 90s production, basically, isn't he?
A legend of 90s production. Yeah. So so you can see how these kind of elements converge. Like there's songs that I think I wrote in the review, there was like a song that sounded like garbage, like via version 2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a very perplexing record, but at the same time it's a very inviting one, you know, and I love how Yves has kind of tapped into writing pop records, because Day is really good at writing pop records.
Yeah, with that element. I mean, I haven't heard this one. I really loved the last album, so I'm not sure why I haven't dived into this, and I'm definitely going to, because what you're telling me is kind of, I mean, that's pretty much what we're about on this podcast, isn't it? We love those
for sure.
those 90s references, and it just sounds like such a fun embrace, and it's great, isn't it, to get an artist who nails one sound and then thinks, okay, I'm gonna change gears, I'm gonna try something different, rather than kind of mind that comfort zone, just move on to the next decade and give us something different. It's someone who's just, you know, in control of their career, and having fun, and if they're having fun, there's a good chance we're going to be having fun as well. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. And if the last one was very funkadelic kind of sound too, because that's another like main staple of that album. Like this one, you can appreciate it in a completely different context, but Day retains their personality, and it's immediately noticeable. So give it a listen if you haven't.
Brilliant. Right then. So yeah, that concludes part one. I'm not sure we've got through even a third of the records yet, so we're going to have to pick up the pace in part two.
Okay.
We'll take a short break and we'll be back in a minute.
Yep.
Welcome back to the March 2023 release roundup. So I'm going to tell you incredibly briefly about my album of the month. The reason for that is that I want to talk about this band in more detail in an upcoming episode of the podcast, when I'm going to pick one of their songs, hopefully. So I don't want to kind of use all my good material now. But the record is by a Finnish power pop, indie pop band called the Fernet Underground. The album is called something in Finnish that I think I could try to study Finnish for about 20 years and I wouldn't come close to being able to pronounce it. And that doesn't really matter. I don't think we have too many listeners in Finland. They might be able to get in touch and let us know what this record's about. But I think it doesn't really matter to me that I can't understand what the songs are about, or I don't really know what they're singing about. I think sonically it's just so fun. It just really nails that sort of sweet spot between power pop and garage rock and indie pop. It's that sort of little crossover area that I just always love. Reminds me a little bit of Michael Cronin. I think we were talking about a Danish band called Figurines from about 18 years ago. That was slightly reminiscent of them as well.
Very frenetic kind of.
Yeah, frenetic
power pop in a
rockers,
way, or indie rock, whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
but with that sort of with that little element of harmonies as well, and there's a little bit of jangle as well at times.
It does.
It's just got a little bit of everything that I love, and it just. We were talking earlier about records that are overlong. This just, to me, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It knows what it's all about. It gets its business done and moves on to the next track. There's something incredibly economical about it, which I love. I just think it is a really, really fun record. Maybe one of the best new power pop records I've heard since last year's Second Grade album, which wasn't that long ago, but
wasn't that long ago. I could probably say the same thing too. I don't think I've heard any like really good power pop records, but you sold me on this one, and I really like it a lot. I don't know. I always like when bands just try to pick up the speed, and they try to do something speedier without kind of feeling like they're tumbling like tower of Jenga blocks, and they just kind of like maintain that balance, and I love that. And yeah, also heard a little of the Hives too at parts.
Yeah, there are sort of punkier elements too.
Yeah, punkier elements too. So
one of the really good things as well, if you listen to it on Spotify or on other streaming services are available, of course, but the algorithm then threw me up a load of other sort of like-minded Finnish artists. So I made myself a little playlist of lots of different Finnish bands that I wouldn't have heard of, and there seems to be a real hotbed of power pop and slightly punkier garage music over there that was just really, really appealing to me. So at least 6 or 7 bands, and I found a really good Finnish shoegaze band as well that I'll try to shine a light on sometime too. So go Finland. Yeah,
there you go.
So that is the Fernet Underground. We'll put the playlist together in the show notes as well, so you can check that one out. Highly recommended. So yeah, that was my record of the month. You mentioned that a record nearly made record of the month for you, and I think that was the ZULU album. Is that right?
No, that was probably number 3 though. But I can talk about ZULU though.
Talk about ZULU then, and then we'll come to whatever number 2 was, because I listened to this ZULU record finally.
Oh, did you? Okay.
I'd seen your review, and I thought I'm gonna give it a go because it sounded wild.
Yeah,
and it was a real shock to the system. Even though I read the review, I wasn't quite expecting that kind of intensity of it's like hardcore but ramped up. It's like even harder than hardcore. Yeah,
basically
it was almost oppressive at times, but then all of a sudden it's Curtis Mayfield, and what the hell's going on?
right. So ZULU is a band from LA. I think they're pretty, they had a few EPs, and this is like their first full length. And we don't talk a lot about metal, especially hardcore in a sense, but I think this record is really impressive. If anything, it takes from power violence and thrash, which are 2 subgenres of metal, which are speedier, shorter songs.
Yeah.
And they tend to be 2 of my favorite metal genres overall, instead of like, black metal or whatever. So, but I love how there's a focus on brevity, but they nail it really well. But what really makes it special is just how the samples just really mesh so well with the music, which you wouldn't expect it doesn't, but it's one of the stronger statements of the year. It celebrates, and the samples are mostly Black artists, so it really celebrates Black culture and its music through different generations. There's some samples that I'm like, where can I find that song? I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
You mentioned Mayfield, which is like one of the more obvious examples, but the quality here is very rich. Yeah, like the power violence can be a little more on the primitive side, and sometimes I think that's my only caveat, that it can be a little tiring after a while, and I feel like it's not until the last track where they kind of go a little more expansive and slower. But I'm really looking forward to hear more about because I like albums with like strong thematic cores, and this one really nails it really well.
It's certainly it's fun. It's a different kind of fun. It's not always easy, and it was much more than I expected. But I did enjoy this record actually.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, and I think it's one that I will enjoy exploring again, probably when the children and the dog isn't around, because this was another one that was so disturbing, the dog.
For the dog, yeah.
So that was number 3 for you. What was the other one? Lana Del Rey.
Yeah, and you know what? ZULU could be number 2. The problem with Lana Del Rey is that in many ways I feel like it's my favorite album of this month, but surprisingly, I'm not a big Lana fan. I think as far back as I wrote about her first record, and I wasn't very complimentary. I remember, my gosh, I'm aging myself here, but it's been like over 15 years, I think. I don't know.
Well, you didn't write an index, did you? So at least there was that.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know. So here's the thing. I think there's such a really solid mood throughout these first 12 tracks, I have to say, that I really enjoy. It has a lot of the very self-indulgent kind of Lana-isms, I mean, that you come to expect, but I feel like she's a little more forthright in about coming up with a little more about herself instead of necessarily these like cringy, kind of like viral kind of lyrics that she's known for. It's kind of like a classical piano record with a melancholic kind of swoon. So think about like maybe movie scores, or think about even Chopin. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It does if you listen to it. So it has a really good song with Father John Misty, actually, which kind of blends like 70s California pop. You know, he likes that stuff too. So it makes total sense.
That makes sense, definitely.
Yeah, but I think the last 4 tracks just kind of going, it just ruins it. And I think it's probably because track 13 has a Bleachers track, and just like I feel like Jack Antonoff has a prevalence for ruining things for me. So terrible track. Hate this track. And the rest of it is just very spotty. So Lana Del Rey, first 12 tracks, excellent album. The rest I'm not so sure about.
Is that Jack Antonoff's only involvement? Has he produced it, or
he produced it? And again, if he's behind the boards, that's fine. He does a really good job, obviously. But once he starts singing in a track and he starts to sound like Cohen or Springsteen or something, it's like, get out, man. Just don't do it.
Yeah. Don't do it on this record. Do it on a record that I'm not going to listen to.
Well, Bleachers is not a great project, but my opinion.
Pun?
Little hot take there, but we can go back. Let's go back to the
let's stay in the
move
moment,
on.
stay much. So well, I'll go next. Sleaford Mods. This was
all right. Yeah,
Sleaford Mods, always the critically acclaimed Sleaford Mods. This is their 12th album. This is amazingly their 3rd top 10 UK album in a row.
Wow, really?
So this is a band that's, and I think it peaked at number 3, I think, which is the highest chart placing they've had. They get bigger, and the acclaim seems to grow with each record, and I just don't see it. I love the fall. I love it. I love it when music gets political. I love the idea of Sleaford Mods. I really do. There's their politics chimes with mine. They did some material that was thematically exploring Brexit and the pandemic. They've spoken up about misinformation about COVID vaccines and things. So there are a lot of reasons why I should be on the same page with them. But when I hear the music, man, I just find it incredibly jarring, and it just doesn't do it for me. I don't see the reason to get excited about this. I don't see the progression. In music criticism, there was a really famous line about the Velvet Underground from Lester Bangs, which was from heroin to Jesus in 2 years. Sleaford Mods have had 16 years, and they just don't seem to have moved anywhere. And we're still talking about austerity. We're still talking about Britain being shit, and I get it, because it is, and austerity is terrible, and all these things. But I feel like they've said it so much and so consistently over 12 albums. I just want to hear something slightly different, some solutions, or even riffing on the fact that they've just had 3 fairly successful albums. Where's the Champagne Socialist record, where they're complaining about their unreasonable tax
their success? I mean, they're definitely in a different echelon now. And I think you have to, with Sleaford Mods, you have to kind of appreciate their personality to kind of get it to. And I think a lot of people gravitate to their personalities and even their accents. So
yeah,
I have a hard time sometimes with them. Like I feel like at first it became a novelty and it was really cool, but then it just became a little tiring for me. But again, they seem like cool guys, and I'd like to talk to them sometime.
Yeah, I think and I think they are. I think they are really, there's every reason to like them apart from the music, and I just think there is the constant acclaim. Either I don't get it, or there's some sort of Emperor's New Tracksuit or something going on here. Where
that's a good one. Yeah, I like that.
I think we're just conditioned to say it's great because we agree with the politics and the general thrust of it. And to be against it maybe is to be, part of the establishment, the elite, Tory scum, whatever. So yeah, I will continue to try. I'll continue to give them a go. I think there is some slight sonic development. That the backing tracks have become a little more developed. There's a collaboration with the singer from Dry Cleaning, which added a little bit of color.
I didn't even realize while listening to it.
There's also Perry Farrell is on there as well.
Oh, I see. Again, like when I heard this record, I don't know. It just sounds like the two of them. I don't.
Yeah, I mean that's an odd combo.
Love Perry, so I'll dig up like the specific tracks.
Yeah,
for sure.
So at least have a listen to them. Credit to them. They worked their asses off by all accounts, trying to break into the business, and they've carved out a career and a loyal fan base. And I don't want to crap on that. I just don't.
No, for sure.
Just not for me. Yeah. So there you are, Sleaford Mods. Rant over. What have we got next? The Hold Steady, another kind of band that have very much, they do their thing, don't they? They have their storytelling and they have their sound. You know what you're getting with the Hold Steady. Is it more of the same, or is there something new going on here?
It's I mean, to go very briefly, it's more the same but with new tricks. I feel like they are like a 6-piece now, so keep that in mind. They do sound like a pretty robust band, but I feel like with the Hold Steady, it can kind of veer into almost self-parody in a way after 20 years. But I mean, Craig Finn is a great storyteller, and it kind of sounds like kind of reading into like a Raymond Carver book or something, or short stories, right? Where it's a lot about working stiffs or kind of like scumbags, but trying to get by in life, but everything kind of seems to go wrong, whether by choice or circumstance. And it's a lot of that again. But the music kind of has its new tricks, it's some horns, some piano synthesizers in some parts. It doesn't sound like a kind of like a bar band. I mean, it still does in a lot of ways, but not completely.
There's some evolution there. Yeah.
Yeah, you think about bands like Dr. Feelgood or something, right? Where it was like total bar band throughout their whole career. No, like these guys have been progressing, and it really shows. So
I haven't checked in with them for years, but I remember seeing them live, and they had a really devoted following. And there were people there who, and this was in the UK, but and I think the little vignettes in the songs are it's very Americana, isn't it?
It is vignettes,
small town, working class Americana, and that isn't, it is different, but people were living in those vignettes, and it was like, this was their band.
It's relatable.
I've rarely seen such a kind of a loyal following, loving a gig, and I enjoyed it. They were good. They were a good tight band. So I'll check that out. I haven't heard them for a while. Another band that have been around for years, carved out a little niche for themselves, is M83. I was so excited for this record, with the lead single. I forget what it's called, but it had this kind of driving krautrock kind of motoric rhythm, and it just sounded
and like 80s guitars too.
Yeah, and
I don't know, it makes sense.
It sounded like something monumental was coming. I thought this was going to be maybe like this year's Beach House, where a band that had been around for ages kind of released that out of the blue 8th, 9th album that is just putting them back in the game, and the record just doesn't live up to it for me. I was really
it's a little
disappointed with.
underwhelming. It sounds great though, don't get me wrong. It sounds like a great record. I don't think it's a failure necessarily, but I kind of like how Anthony Gonzalez is kind of sticking to his own, his own style, his own sound, and he kind of wanted to go back to those earlier records. I'm not super well versed into M83 because a lot of the music seems to blend in for me, but he wanted to go to those kind of early records, and I'm sure you know a little bit more about that sound. Maybe it lives up to it. Sounds like it doesn't, but at the same time, I feel like it was much better in the beginning, and then it kind of like
fizzled out a little bit.
It fizzled out a little,
It's a shame. I had such high hopes, but again, maybe a victim of expectation because of the strength of that one track. Hawkline, another artist with a hawk in his name, so not to be confused with Hamish Hawk, Chesney Hawks, Hawk and a Hacksaw. Hedgehog.
Wow, I haven't heard of that band in a while.
That's right.
Wow.
I did my research. Hawk related. Maya Hawk as well. Joe's favorite from last year. So this was a good record, I thought. You
didn't love it, right? You thought it was okay.
I didn't love it, but it's solid. It's engaging. Like a nice warmth to it. It just sort of washed over me, but it was a pleasant listen, I thought.
Yeah, it's a little more cohesive than I feel like he kind of has like a gonzo kind of art pop style, like Kate LeBon. I know they used to be partners. I don't know if they are, but they still collaborate regardless. So very piano pop driven, this one, as opposed to some of the other ones that he's done. Still kind of quirky, but more subdued, but the repeated piano refrains are really, really nice to me. That's like a weakness of mine. It has some very beautiful moments. I know there's a track called Like You Do, which I really love. But yeah, I know that mature songwriting is an overused term, but I really like that there's like a sense of progression here in a songwriting sense.
Yeah, and speaking of mature songwriting, Steve Mason from the Beta Band had a record out this month. Again, I was listening to this 3-4 tracks in. I'm like, okay, it's like a more mature Beta Band. It's a middle-aged guy who's found his comfort zone and is in command of his songwriting, but isn't doing much new. But as the record kind of progressed, I found myself getting more drawn into it, and it was less in the background, and that was sort of getting into a very gentle groove to this record, and I thought this was just a really lovely, warm, simple, modest but mature record.
No, and I see what you mean, because I started listening to it, but I stopped precisely because I thought there was a lot of instrumentation kind of happening that was really interesting, and it kind of like almost in the same way that I appreciate a lot of Elbow records, which are very sophisticated in their sound. So I deliberately stopped listening to it because I knew I didn't really have the sound and the space or the mind space to kind of give it its proper due. So I will get back to it, and I know I will appreciate it because it's very interesting from what I heard.
Yeah, I think it's one to really listen to, isn't it, rather than just have it on in the background while you're running errands or doing chores or something like that. It's I always had a soft spot for the Beta Band, and it's good to see him still producing engaging quality material like 20 plus years on. So 25 years on, I guess, from the 3 EPs, probably.
Even more.
Wow. We'll rattle through a few more records from the month and then give a few really quick shout outs at the end. So Frankie Rose, another artist. It's established artists month, isn't it? We haven't talked about too many debuts. Frankie Rose been around in various projects. for quite some time. Most notable to me, I think, for writing that really good Vivian Girls song. Where do you run
Yeah.
to? Yeah.
Oh,
I
she
think
wrote that
that,
song?
yeah, I believe so.
Oh,
So that
maybe
was
she
like,
wasn't like a main part of the band, but maybe she left early in the
yeah.
career. Yeah.
And I think that remains her high point after listening to this record. I was a little underwhelmed with this one.
You are, yeah. I can see it. I mean, I'm happy she's making a return after 6 years. It doesn't sound groundbreaking in any way, but she has such a well-rounded vision, I feel, that of what she does, that it kind of makes it sounds more distinctive than it initially lets on. I mean, I like Frankie Rose, and it sounds kind of like a new wave album, and that's kind of cool to me, kind of gothy and parts, but yeah, I enjoy it.
Yeah. Good. Secret Machines. I know you were singing the praises of this record. Just another band I have really fond memories of from many years ago. I saw them live, I think about 2000
I never have. So
2008, I want to say. Now This Is Nowhere. Was that the record they were playing then?
That was earlier actually.
Was
That
it?
was probably 2005 or 2004.
Maybe it was that's the one they
Because
were touring at the time.
They released their self-titled third LP in 2008. So
right,
must have been during that time period.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a little unfair because this one I heard the wave files of this record and it just sounded mind-blowing to me. I don't know. This album just like Spotify, Apple Music won't do it justice. I mean, it's a stereo headphones listen. I will say like little things, like they completed this album after they started working on it in 2010. So they kind of came back to complete it 13 years later, but it's like more loose, more sprawling than their comeback album 2 years ago, which was a little more punchy and pop oriented, like their debut LP. This one is like more of a, if you like your space rock, in a more like experimental way, but still really good drumming, really good production. Give it a shot. I mean, there's pretty good highs on this one.
Good. I briefly listened, but again, not with the appropriate setup or quality of files. So
it sounds great. Yeah.
Good. The Reds, Pinks, and Purples. Just a real workhorse of a band. I think this is. I've lost count, but certainly I think record number 7 in the last 5 years, or something along those lines. It's been more than a record a year, I think, coming from this artist. I think eternally interesting and competent with some strong moments, but as in terms of an album, never mind-blowing, never thrilling, just dependable and interesting.
Yeah,
but
I
not
kind of have
stellar,
Yeah, I have a bone to pick with this one. I mean, I feel like there's a little stagnancy here, I have to say. I don't see this project ever growing too much. And even for someone like me who likes Django and especially Slumberland records, I fail to find anything that really sticks to me in a melodic sense. Like, I respect that he can make a modest career out of what he does. That's awesome. And I'd like to hear a little more variation, honestly. Like, I don't know. I think my problem, like the melodies are nice, but the rhythm section just kind of like stays locked into this like mid-tempo that just kind of bores me after a while. So
that's it.
I
think they're like the eternal architects of the 7 out of 10 record. It's in that realm, and it just feels like it wouldn't take that much, like a couple of significant tempo shifts, to add a bit of vibrancy to the albums. I think you're right. The quality control's there, but the variety isn't. I think that's the stumbling block. But I think if you haven't heard the band, you'd enjoy the record coming to it for a first time. I don't think there's anything wrong with the record. It's the context, right, isn't it? It's the fact that there've been such a string of records that sound similar.
Yeah. It's a little frustrating, but I still enjoy parts of it. Don't get me wrong.
Last one I want to talk about is U2. Now, I will confess I've never, ever, 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 and I'm not going to start now. I'm certainly not going to start with this record. I've never listened to a U2 album in its entirety. I
Yikes.
have a U2 sized problem that I will perhaps address one day, but today is not that day.
Yeah.
And I gather that this record would not be the place to start.
Look, I love you too. I'll be honest, but this is not the record to listen to if you like U2. It's kind of like repurposed old songs. It's weird because it's like a cross promotion with this book Surrender, which is actually a really good book in my opinion, but that book has 40 tracks. This album has 40 tracks. They're not the same tracks, so there's no cohesion there, which I guess is fine. So you get more U2 if that's what you want. But they just sound like repurposed songs out of, songs that were already good to begin with or great. So why mess with them or even change the lyrics to, like Bono had an intention of like changing the lyrics to more of his like present sense and make them maybe less cringy, but in a way it sounds more cringy if you change them. So so it has some tracks, they sound pretty good in their new states, but still it sounds like if you want to listen to U2, just go to the old records or just wait until maybe they release something new, but this is not it really.
No. I think I'll just pass altogether, I think.
I mean, you've been passing for like decades now, so it's fine.
I've gone down this path, and it's a long way to turn back.
Before I forget, like 2 really quick shout outs before we kind of end. If you like electronic music, there's Fever Ray and Kate Envy, very 2 different projects. If you like the more kind of Steve Reich, Arthur Russell kind of experimentation with some buoyancy and some kind of fun experimentation, listen to Kate, whereas Fever Ray is more like a club kind of IDM meets club record. I think it's really good too, so check that one out too.
I listened briefly to Fever Ray, and I was a huge fan of the Knife, but I haven't really got around to their solo output yet for some reason. I don't know why. I was not that it's sonically necessarily the same, but I was transported straight back to hearing Silent Shout.
It sounds a little like it,
and I think I saw the cover and I'd read a couple of interviews, and I thought it was going to be more abstract and a little less enjoyable, but it sounded really, really just wild and exciting and fun. So I thought it was great. Really enjoyed that one. I've got a few quick shout outs as well. This is all kind of power poppy punk kind of realm, just because I think it's been a good month for that. We've got, first of all, The Lost Days. That's a project between Tony Molina and Sarah Rose Janko.
Man, I have to listen to that one.
It's just like power pop royalty, right? It's just there's a little bit of power pop, a little bit of sort of Sarah Records vibe to it as well. It's a little bit mellow, little bit of jangle there. It's right up your street, and just a nice short breezy album that's really, really just, it locks into a nice sound, bit of variation, but nothing too wild, but just really good songwriting. And it seems like a really nice collaboration there. We've got another Australian band, one for Joe perhaps, a Melbourne band called The Sprouts. This record is called Eat Your Greens, which I think is a great name for an album. It's only 27 minutes, so you get the idea. It's, I think, 12 songs, all under 3 minutes, super punchy. Lots of jangle, quite lo-fi. Reminds me a little bit, there's like a little sort of jangly shuffle to the guitars that reminds me a little bit of Loaded by the Velvet Underground, that record. It's sort of guitar pop within that realm. I mean, that's quite a high high level comparison to saddle them with. So don't expect the Velvet Underground, but there is an element of it there. It's a fun record. I really like that one. Grandma's House, Bristol, all-female queer punk band. I think I recommended Male last month, who were also a very feminist punk band. This is even more raucous than that Male record. It's a short EP called Who Am I? It's just really, really passionate and raucous and falling apart and angry and exuberant and fun, and just packs an awful lot in, really, to a short record. And I found that really quite just a really fun record, really. And the last one is Whitney's Playland. This is a Californian band, something not too far from your neck of the woods. Their record is called Sunset Sea Breeze, and this is I was trying to think of some touchstones, and they describe themselves as sort of shades of Guided by Voices, Yo La Tengo, and the Sundays. And I can't do any better than that. I mean, it really does sound like that. Vocally, you've got the Sundays element. It's a female singer. So that brought that to mind straight away. But there's a little bit of fuzz and a bit of grit to the guitars, and they can kind of lock into that sort of ambient-y kind of groove, like Yo La Tengo as well. So it's a fun record. It doesn't sound derivative. It just sounds really summery and jangly as well. I think, again, if you like jangle, lo-fi, power pop, indie pop, these picks are going to be up your street. So a few
that's some homework to do. Yeah,
for some smaller bands. Yeah, happy to raise the profile a little. So that is our breathless take on the March 2023 records. There was not a classic month, but a lot of stuff worth listening to, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I was challenged to listen to a lot, for sure, that I wasn't expecting. So hopefully, I always say it, hopefully next month will be lighter, but it probably won't, let's be honest.
Yeah, well, there's always good music if you look hard enough. That's a problem.
Exactly.
But also, it's a good problem to have. So
right.
we'll be back again soon with another monthly roundup. But thanks for listening.